Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first in a series of virtual special events from the Citizens Commission on National Security, or CCNS. I am Roger Aronoff, the Executive Director and Editor of CCNS. We are a nonprofit national security watchdog organization. Our website is ccnationalsecurity.org. That's CC for Citizens Commission, nationalsecurity.org. Today's show is titled Election Chaos, Can It Still Be Avoided? My co-host is Bobby Eberly, who I will be introducing shortly. We will be looking at several issues related to the upcoming November 3rd election. Clearly, our nation is bitterly divided. Both sides claim the other side is attempting to rig or defraud or suppress the vote. Many people on both sides of the political spectrum are predicting chaos and uncertainty in the post-election day period. Will it last days, weeks, or even months before the election is finally decided? Will we get to a point that enough people on each side of the divide will agree that the election was free and fair, and therefore will agree on which candidate won? There is so much at stake in this process, including civil disorder in this country, and being able to maintain our democratic institutions, which have served us so well for nearly 250 years. This definitely is a national security issue. Here's what we plan to cover today. Republicans and President Trump are talking about the likelihood of voter fraud and the system being overwhelmed with millions of ballots circulating and unaccounted for. Democrats and their media allies argue that Republicans are engaged in voter suppression. We've seen many examples of fraud and uncertainty trying to settle elections, such as the Democratic primary in New York this past summer, where it took more than a month to determine the winner because of mail-in ballots. In 2018, we had a situation in Orange County, California, where a handful of congressional seats held by Republicans were flipped to the Democrats when enough ballots came in weeks after Election Day to change the outcome in favor of the Democrats. And there are other issues. Why are there such battles over purging voter rolls, something that seems such common sense that you want to remove the dead people and people who have moved away and have gone to prison and other things like that who shouldn't be on those rolls? And we'll be looking at the possible scenarios for what we might be facing. So to discuss these and other issues, we have a couple of great guests today who you will hear from shortly. One is Alan West, the chairman of the Texas Republican Party. The other is J. Christian Adams, the president and general counsel of the Public Interest Legal Foundation. First, I want to welcome Bobby Eberly and say thank you for what I know we both hope is the start of an excellent series of virtual special events. Dr. Eberly is a conservative political analyst, writer, commentator, and owner of GOPusa.com, as well as a professional race car driver and former aerospace engineer. Quite a background, Bobby. He has served in conservative Republican leadership roles at the county, state, and national levels, and he is the host of the 13-Minute News Hour on YouTube. Bobby, take it away.
Roger, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And I want to say a special thank you, folks, to Roger. He and I got together. We started talking about this, but this was his idea, this brainchild, to bring these issues that are so important to the American people, bring experts together so we can discuss it. And what is more important than the integrity of elections? I mean, we see what's going on with the Democrats. We see what's going on in the media. All you have to do is watch one press conference to see how unseriously the media take this stuff. Case after case after case. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, you name it, there's cases of voter fraud. Mail-in ballots getting misprinted, getting sent multiple times, getting sent to other locations. We see it happening all the time. The media are ignoring it. The Democrats are ignoring it. And they want this to happen. They want the chaos. They want the anarchy that we've seen all summer long, but it's up to people to understand what's going on so that we can get the information, make good decisions, and fight this. Because if we do not have secure elections, we lose our republic. It is as simple as that. And I'm so happy to be part of this program and talk to experts in the field, people who have been entrenched in doing this for so long. And this brings us to our first guest. Now, he's done so much. I put together a short bio just to kind of sum up this guy. This is J. Christian Adams. And I just want to read this for you guys because I can't wait to dive into some of this election stuff. But here's J. Christian Adams. He serves, as Roger said, as the president and general counsel of the Public Interest Legal Foundation. He formerly served in the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division under President George W. Bush. He's the author of the New York Times bestseller, Injustice, Exposing the Racial Agenda of the Obama Justice Department, which examines the department's election and voting rights record. In August, he was appointed to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights by President Trump. At that time in August, Washington Examiner said this about our guest: "No one will fight harder for the civil rights of Black people than Christian Adams will. He will do so, however, from the standard not of racial grievance, but of strict equality before the law. To the left, that makes Adams a dangerous man. To most people, that will make him a hero." And that really sums it up. So I want to welcome our guest, J. Christian Adams. And Christian, thanks for being with us on this program.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I want to get to kind of the current state of affairs, because when I was getting involved in politics in the middle 90s, we had things going on kind of like, there's cases of voter fraud, but all of a sudden, you've got the 2000 elections. You've got hanging chads and dimpled chads and people trying to use ESP to determine who voted. And then it seems like it just kept getting worse. 2008, we have the case that you got involved in with the new Black Panthers actually intimidating voters. So I would love for you to give us a little bit of background on that and how you think things devolved to this point, and give me your take on that.
Well, that's a lot. Let me try to unpack that. The first thing I want to emphasize is the money that has been pouring into this fight. I like to say that the money cares about process. What do I mean by process? How you vote, where you vote, who has to sign an absentee ballot, all of the sort of parliamentarian rules. That's what I mean by process. And so the left has been devoted to this for over a decade, altering the process rules. You might be familiar with these fights when it comes to voter ID, for example, and all of the lawsuits that the Holder administration filed. But I cannot overstate the importance of process to the left. Conservatives and the Republicans are very, very late to the game in understanding this. And, it was like a voice in the wilderness the last couple, going back to 12, 13, 14, trying to explain to people, particularly in the, if you will, the more establishment corners of the party, how important this is. Everybody wants to care about policy, and I think policy is important, but the left understands that policy is downstream of process. And so one other quick thing I want to mention, voter fraud is sort of the easy way to understand things, like, people are voting other people's ballots, and I've tried those cases in federal court. But this is bigger than just voter fraud. The left is pouring money into this fight to change what is most of us think is illegal or unfair into something legal. In other words, they're changing the rules, so it's not voter fraud, it's just a whole new system that they want to replace the election system with. They'd want to keep this fundamental truth in mind. They want everybody to be voting on their couch with a remote control over every issue that comes before the public. They believe in pure democracy, and the founders know where that led.
Right, absolutely. You have that. You have anarchy, chaos, people swayed from emotion, which is what the Democrats play on. Absolutely.
Well, right. And you see this fight in all over the country now. I mean, this is the year of process litigation. It's overwhelming. There's 170 lawsuits that have been filed over COVID fights around the country. Some states see like 5 or 6 of them. My organization, the Public Interest Legal Foundation, we've intervened now in, I think, 14 cases. We have filed multiple cases. We sued the city of Detroit. There were people dead in Detroit for 25 years that were still on the rolls. We sued Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh. Allegheny County, we found a guy registered to vote there 7 times. He has 7 active registrations, all done within 2 weeks. 2 weeks by a third-party group out of Colorado. I've got all the forms. He filled them out about every other day he registered to vote right before the 2016 election. So these are the sorts of things we're finding on the voter rolls all around the country.
Right. So, okay, let's talk about that. You mentioned this idea that we call it voter fraud, but what they're trying to do is actually change that so it's not fraud by definition. And we see, I believe it's 26 states now are allowing ballot harvesting. They are allowing ballots to come in long after the polls actually close. I mean, postmarked, I hope it's postmarked by Election Day, but weeks afterwards. So what's your biggest concerns with this particular election?
Well, my biggest concern is that the best way to run an election is in person with transparency. Like most of us grew up voting in person with transparency. They want to decentralize the election into people's kitchens and people's homes, and they want to invite weaknesses to allow lawyers then to litigate. And if you're in battle, Colonel West, you want to exploit your opponents as weaknesses and take advantage of your strengths. And one of the areas where the left can do that is lawyering. They have probably 100 times the legal talent that the right has when it comes to election law. And they've been, when I was in the Justice Department in the voting section, that was like a little training academy for election lawyers. You get to be a very good election lawyer when you work at the Justice Department voting section. And there's probably been 200 to 300 left-wing lawyers that have moved through there in the last 20 years, compared with maybe 15 conservatives, just to give you an example.
Right. Well, so on that legal side, Indiana, they just ruled that officials can't throw out ballots, even if the signatures don't match. And we see case after case of this. So where is this headed? I mean, Supreme Court or what? Where is this headed? And how do we fight back where it seems like what you're getting to, not even implying, but just stating outright, is what we've seen in Hollywood and media and education and big tech, that the left has really focused. They knew probably decades ago that the legal profession, the legal field, is something we need to infiltrate. So if they're doing that, how do we safeguard this election and future elections?
Well, let me start with maybe a bit of admonition. And look, I'm very happy to be here and I'm thrilled to be here. But this is a 365-day-a-year issue, okay? And it's not an October of even-numbered years. And right now I got a lot of litigation I got to be worried about, not trying to educate people about what this is. This is something that people need to worry about in January and February of even-numbered years, and not October of this is what people need to worry about in January of odd-numbered years, got it right that time, and not October of even-numbered years, okay? This is a January, February, March issue, not an October issue. When people just start worrying about it now, it's too late, okay? The die is cast months ago as to how this is going to happen. So, the Public Interest Legal Foundation, we worry about it 365 days a year in off years. So the first thing people can do is worry about this next March and find out whether their local jurisdictions are doing list maintenance. And I don't ever use the word purge, because that's what you do after eating bad fish. That's what Stalin used to do to his generals. The term is list maintenance. You want to do list maintenance on your voter rolls. Purge is a word the left dreamed up, so it sounds bad when you do it. So you want to clean voter rolls. You want to do list maintenance on voter rolls. And that's something they do in March and April after the election. That's when citizens need to be engaged. And that's when citizens need to be going to their local election office and saying, what are you doing to clean your voter rolls after the last election? And in a lot of states, they don't do enough. In a lot of states, they look at Detroit. I had people in Detroit. We had people in Detroit who died in the George W. Bush H.W. Bush administration. Right. And I had a case in Texas. I had a case against Starr County, Texas, that we resolved about 4 years ago to clean the voter rolls there, where an individual was active on the voter rolls who died in 1944. They died in 1944. And I will tell you, just from a litigator's perspective, someone who wants to tell a story to a judge, My hope was there was a combat death, because I thought if there's a combat death from World War II that's still on the voter rolls, I've got a great story. It wasn't a
Right.
combat death, and I wasn't
Oh,
hoping
no.
for a death. You get it. But
Right.
that's how bad it is in some places.
Right. And you also have to have the political or the professional will. I covered a story the other day where it was known that these voter rolls were out of date, inaccurate. We need to clean them. We need to maintain them. And yet, off the record, they were talking, exchanging emails saying that it wasn't worth their time. You know, they were either ignoring the importance, or they don't think that it's worth their time at all. And so we've got to get that message out as well to the people that we are actually charging with maintaining the security of these voter rolls.
And let me give you a story I just learned yesterday, which gets to my October of even versus March of odd. There's some activists around the country right now that are sending out notice letters, right? They're sending out letters to election officials saying you need to clean up all these issues, okay? And look, I'm glad there's energy in this space, okay? But this gets to my October versus March thing. Guess what, folks? Under federal law, you can't do anything 90 days out of an election. You aren't able to fix anything. It freezes in place under the motor voter law. So there's all these federal laws that election lawyers like me who are familiar with could be and I don't want to sound sort of like you guys don't know what you're doing, but it's frustrating to see so much energy right before an election and then nobody cares about these issues in January.
Right.
And so
So
I want
you're
to see
saying-
those letters going out in January, not in October.
Right. So you're saying that, 3 months out, anything there, it's just up to the courts. You kind of are game over.
Not even up to the courts. They'll bounce you out of court. It's an absolute freeze on the rolls. It's called the systemic 90-day systemic list maintenance freeze out.
Okay. All right. Roger, hey, did you have anything there? I wanted to turn it back to you.
No.
Christian, that was amazing. I appreciate all the information, and I'll turn it over to you, Roger.
Okay, thanks. That was very good. I want to introduce our other guest, Alan West, former congressman and retired Army lieutenant colonel. Currently is the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas. He's the author of 3 books, including Hold Texas, Hold the Nation, Victory or Death. Before taking office in Congress, he was an advisor to the Afghan National Army, and on January 3rd, 2011, he took office as the first Black Republican congressman from Florida since 1876. He was also a member of the Tea Party caucus and has been referred to as one of the champions of the Tea Party movement. And as I mentioned, he was with me on the Citizens Commission on Benghazi and now the Citizens Commission on National Security. He's been a great ally and friend. And so, Alan, let's start with you. So, in light of what Christian is saying, what is the situation on the ground in Texas, and how are you preparing for November 3rd and the chaos beyond?
Well, it's good to be with you, and I will echo exactly what Christian talked about, is that too often we try to ramp up in an election cycle, and then after the election cycle, we power down while we have to have a steady state of existence. And the other side, the left, is always strategizing. They're always preparing. They're getting their tactics, techniques, and procedures even bigger and better. You know, back in 2012, I lost my congressional reelection race to what everyone knew was a voter fraud scheme. Little after midnight, 4,000 votes shifted right on the nose. And that took me from being ahead by 2,000 to the opponent being ahead by 2,000. And they knew exactly the amount of votes that they needed in order to stay under having to have a mandatory recount. We caught the Secretary of Elections from that county, Gertrude Walker from St. Lucie County, going into the warehouse late at night to mess around with ballots and things of this nature. So we've got to maintain a steady state. And the other thing is that we have to start punishing people for what they do. Thank God out here in Texas, we just had 4 Democrat election officials that were charged in a mail ballot scheme from 2018. That was over in Gregg County, which is over in East Texas. But if you have been paying attention to the news, we just had reports about the Texas political director for Joe Biden's campaign, a Democrat state senator, and another council member, a commissioner, and Bobby lives down in the area around Harris County. They were just, brought up with an affidavit charging them with being involved with an illegal ballot harvesting scheme. And we know that the Harris County, Houston, is the third largest city in the United States of America, but it's the largest county in the state of Texas. And we have a county clerk there by the name of Chris Hollins, who also happens to be the treasurer of the Texas Democrat Party. And he has had many, Texas Supreme Court has put a stay on him for some of the illegal practices that he wants to do with these mail out ballot applications that, as Christian said, it's just based upon a registered voter list that has not been scrubbed. So there's a lot going on here in Texas as far as trying to make sure that the ballot harvesting scheme, which we have seen uncovered thanks to Project Veritas up there in Minnesota, some of the other things that we have seen happen, Christian talked about it in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and North Carolina, where these activist judges are extending the timeline to submit ballots 4 days, 7 days, 2 weeks beyond November the 3rd. And we know that in Philadelphia recently, we found absentee ballot forms from military servicemen that were put into the trash. So I think one of the critical things is the American people, legal voters, people that are really concerned about voting, they're starting to ask, is our process really that is reflective of a constitutional republic like the United States of America, or is it starting to become a third world banana republic type of process? And I think it's really important that we go back and remember what I think it was Joseph Stalin who said, it is not the person that casts the ballot that matters, it's the person that counts the ballot that matters. And we're starting to see that definitely even here in Texas, where the issue of denying poll workers and poll watchers and election judges to be at certain locations, mainly these annexes that Democrat county clerks have declared a place to collect ballots, and they're not wanting to have poll watchers there. So we got a lot of things going on here in Texas. Texas is such an important state. Roger, I know your brother, he lives down there in Houston and he's experiencing, and like I said, Bobby knows it very well. So what we want to do at the Republican Party of Texas is make sure we continually shine light upon this, and our Secretary of State and our Attorney General, we just pray that they take action.
Well, how late can the ballots arrive in Texas? And say if it's a week or two, who's minding the ballots while that's going on? And what role do you have in that?
Well, that's the key thing. As a matter of fact, that same gentleman from Harris County, Chris Hollins, the county clerk, sent a letter to Governor Abbott requesting an additional 4 days. And that request was denied, but that's what you see happening. And it goes back to exactly what you said, Roger, what we saw in 2018 in Orange County, mainly California, which was a very strong Republican area, that, a week, 2 weeks later, you still have ballots coming in and they know exactly the number that they need. And then the Republican ends up losing. So I think it's very important from a Republican Party standpoint is to talk about our get out the vote efforts. Voter registration will end on October the 5th. So we've got to get people out to vote, because if you're within that margin of cheating, I call it, anywhere from 4% on down, very bad, nefarious things are going to happen in the middle of the night.
Well, I also saw where in Texas, a judge ruled that citizens can now register to vote online, dismissing the need for an actual paper trail. Is that effective immediately, or are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with it. I can't answer specifically about it, but again, that's one of those things where you need to have the signature verifications out there because we want to make sure, we live in a border state. And one of the things that we know the left likes is open borders, and they don't think that we should decriminalize illegally crossing into the state of Texas or into the United States of America. Right. So there's a big concern about people that are here illegally being able to somehow register to vote. And that's why here in Texas, we don't have illegals that can go out and get a driver's license, because then they can get signed up under the motor voter law.
One more I want to touch on with you, Alan, and then we'll go back. to Christian for a minute, but and then we'll open this thing up. But last night I saw Tom Friedman, New York Times Tom Friedman on CNN, and he had a column, and he is just lit up saying that what Trump is engaged in is, quote, the greatest voter suppression effort ever mounted in this country. He says that if Trump doesn't win, his plan is to delegitimize the election and throw it to the Supreme Court or the House of Representatives, and that Trump has set it up for an illegitimate election, that Trump will unleash an army of lawyers. Well, we know back in July, you could find many articles showing the Democrats already had 600 lawyers working on the election. So what do you think of that?
Well, I think that's the narrative that the left likes to try to establish. That's their proactive attack that they try to lay down. But, you know, if you think about it, Roger, the only people that have tried to undermine or deny an election result is the progressive socialist left. And you've seen that from 2016 to today. They continue to do everything they can to try to say that President Trump is illegal. They have come up with all of these different schemes, and now they're trying to come up with this voter scheme. But the ones who really are truthfully suppressing the legal votes of American citizens is the left with these illegal ballot harvesting schemes. And so, you know, if I can say one thing so important, is that we on our side have to have better and stronger messaging that gets ahead of their decision cycle. That's one of the key things that you have in the military, to be able to get inside the opposition's decision cycle. So you take away their opportunities, you take away the ability for them to find gaps by which they can exploit you. But without a doubt, they're trying to set this thing up so that they can come back and delegitimize the election, just the same as they're already saying that they will not meet with Amy Coney Barrett because she's an illegitimate nominee. I don't know what's illegitimate about the president following his enumerated powers in Article 2 to nominate a Supreme Court justice.
Thank you. Christian, let me ask you that same question about Tom Friedman and his talk about, I don't know if you saw him or read the article, but yeah, tell me what your reaction to that is.
It's very important to understand that the term voter suppression is a fake term. It is not one we should ever take seriously. I have a gift card bounty right now for anybody who can find the term voter suppression anywhere in federal law. It doesn't exist. What the left has done is very Orwellian. They've created a word that represents illegal activity and blended it with legal activity. And they've tried to do it, and they use it to smear people. In other words, the law has a couple of things. Vote denial, that's in Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Vote dilution, that's also in the Voting Rights Act. And then voter intimidation, which has clearly defined terms like in the new Black Panther Party case. Vote suppression is a fake term that doesn't exist in the law. I've offered a $500 bounty for anybody that can find the term voter suppression actually in federal law. It's a made-up term, and it's wholly designed to smear people who are advocating legal activity. And that's what Marxists do, is they use terms to smear people for doing something that's legal.
Well, yeah, there's been so much good stuff. I want to throw this out there to Christian and to Alan, and that is outside of the ballots, outside of casting these ballots, whether it's mail-in or whether, cans appear later, how do you think this affects the electors down the line? Because I remember that's not something that I would give much thought to. We vote in November, they go in December, carry out their duty. Do you see that with all of this stuff, this post-COVID, what they're trying to impose as the so-called new normal? How do you think that affects the electors if there's so much chaos going on now? Christian, I'll start with you.
Well, let me give you a scenario. Some of the most radical left-wing secretaries of state in the country, some of them elected with Soros dollars, are in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Minnesota. There's a radical board in North Carolina. Virginia has a radicalized state election office. But let's focus on Pennsylvania for a second. Assume for a moment that Trump wins Pennsylvania on election night by, let's say 10,000 votes, sort of like Congressman West was saying in his race. And then over the next couple of days, perhaps weeks, Mail ballots that keep showing up, particularly in Philadelphia, begin to whittle away that. But the Secretary of State has hard deadlines to certify and to give commissions to electors for the Electoral College. What happens when Kathy Bachvar, who's the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, decides on her own, I don't know if I can give Trump electors these commissions because we can't figure out who actually won. That's the sort of situation where this begins to interface with the Electoral College process.
Right. And Alan, go ahead. You have something on that?
Yeah, I will go back to April the 14th of this year. I mean, the left laid out their plan when Eric Holder wrote an op-ed piece that said how coronavirus should change elections in the United States permanently. And when you read that article, he just laid it out about mail-in ballots and all of these different type of things. But to kind of echo what Christian was talking about, you have all of these blue states that have come up with this interstate compact agreement. I think they're up to about 15 or 16 states that are saying that they're going to give their electors, not to the person that wins their state, but who wins the national popular vote. And that's the name of the Interstate Popular Vote Compact. And so you're seeing the left doing everything that they possibly can to try to undermine our electoral process and undermine how the founding fathers set this process up so it could pretty much so be kind of foolproof. But again, you're going to see a lot of these manipulations. You're going to see them trying to drag it out, and that's why it's so important that President Trump has a decisive victory going into this, because they want it to be drawn out for a month or 2 months, and they want that confusion, they want the chaos, and that's exactly what you see happening in the streets. And as Christian already said, that's true blue tactical Marxism, is to create that type of chaos and that type of violence, that type of uncertainty, to undermine governmental institutions like what they're doing now, and then they just sweep in and they control and seize power in our country.
Yeah, it's absolutely unreal, Alan, to think that this is the party that has ignored saying anything about violence up and until and through their national spotlight of the Democrat National Convention, said nothing about it, and now they're trying to actually make it an issue when they know they want it. They know it helps advance their fear agenda, their control agenda. But I read a scenario, and Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, is it possible, if there is this chaos, if there's, some uncertainty, or even if it looks like in a state that the rightful electors should show up and that's what should be sent to Washington, D.C., that they could actually send to both sets and say, you guys decide it?
Well, ultimately, decision about the outcome of things like that, the founders of our country, or at least the ones who wrote the 12th Amendment, which isn't too far away from the founders, ultimately put the power into Congress to decide what to do. And so it is the power of Congress in a dispute to decide these issues. And, that could be good, but I'll tell you, that's a provision the founders put in there, and they knew that we were getting close to the end times if we had to use it. It's one of those, right, we'll put it in here, but let's hope you don't ever have to use this.
Right. I've gone through some nightmare scenarios on, Pelosi being acting president at least, and, just based on timelines and indecision and all this stuff. And Alan, what are you seeing on the ground as far as, at least on the conservative side, the Republican side, on people's, voting in person, voting by mail, getting that word out there? What's the kind of the feedback you've been seeing on the street?
Well, I will tell you, there have been some events I've gone out to, and some of the seniors there have just started yelling and screaming at me about the fact that they did receive a mail-in ballot application. And I asked them what their age was, and of course they're over 65. And then I explained to them, in accordance with Texas election law that says 65 years and above, you will be receiving a mail-in ballot application, because you can vote by a mail-in ballot, absentee ballot. And so I think there are a lot of people that are concerned about this. They're reading the papers, they're seeing what is happening, and they are not very trusting. When you see a report of stacks of mail absentee ballots from our military sitting in the trash, they don't want to have that happen to them, when they know that the American Postal Workers Union came out and endorsed Joe Biden They don't want the postal workers to be picking up ballots and things of that nature. Down in Harris County, when you have that county clerk just talking about 24-hour mail-in ballots or collection points for ballots, but yet he's not going to allow any poll workers or watchers. That just undermines people's confidence in this thing that was established for a good purpose, which was the absentee ballot system. But now, as Christian has said, you find people that are taking it and using it for nefarious and illegal intent.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And this brings up just one thing. You know, we've talked about like your race, Alan, and the efforts by the Democrats to cause this chaos and the left-wing judges extending deadlines and everything. And I wanted to just get your guys' thought on see if you think there's this possibility that it could all actually backfire, because there's the one thing of the conscious efforts, you know, the ballot cans that just show up. But we've seen these examples, and this is why Kayleigh McEnany and the president and all of us who are talking about it bring up these examples where just the system bogs down and fails because ballots get lost. They don't show up in test cases. So with the Democrats putting so much emphasis on mail-in voting, could we possibly see it backfire and just the system get swamped and they actually disenfranchise themselves? Christian?
Well, we've been collecting data from the Nevada. You know, Nevada's the state that really has rushed to vote by mail. Clark County, Nevada mailed out 1.3 million mail ballots to every single registered voter in Clark County. No, you know, you didn't need to file a request. You just mailed them out. And 1.3 million went out. 310,000 came back. Of those 310,000, 7,000 were straight up rejected as defective. Somebody screwed something up. So that's 7,000 people who lost their vote, who probably don't even know they lost their vote. Here's the important statistic. 253,000 of those Clark ballots out of 1.3 million, 253,000 bounced as undeliverable, that the addresses don't exist anymore. And I could tell you, I spent last week in Nevada shooting a film of all of these addresses that bounced. And we've got some fantastic footage.
Oh, that's
it's coming out later this week. Vacant lots, liquor stores, bong stores, people who don't live there anymore got ballots. So
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And then there's people that are waiting for their ballot that never arrives because they've moved, they haven't updated. And the left's probably counting on that vote. Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
So you paint a very bleak picture, I'm afraid, because they are so on the offense to win this and steal this, and they accuse the right of voter suppression. And what seems to be happening is that, look, I'm not sure that we're playing defense well enough to prevent this. And one point I want to make, a couple things. From 2016, if you look at the number of states where the margin of victory was 50,000 or less, you only have a handful of states. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like probably 45 out of the 50 states it's not going to be contested. After Election Day, those electoral votes are put to bed. But I can just quickly run down them. Alaska, Trump won by 45,000. Now, Alaska's a small population state. Delaware, Hillary won by 50,000. Nevada, Hillary won by 25,000. New Hampshire, she won by 3,000. Pennsylvania, Trump won by 45,000. And Wisconsin, Trump won by 25,000. And then Michigan,
Minnesota was razor thin.
He won by 11,000. So, you know, it seems to me it's going to be a handful of states that these battles are going to take place. And, you know, you mentioned all the lawsuits, Christian, that have been filed. I mean, is this all going to end up in the Supreme Court with, you know, the new justice ruling on this case? I mean, play out the scenario that you see happening.
Well, look, I don't think many of these cases will end up in the Supreme Court. The ones that I know about, the ones I've read the pleadings in, sometimes they're so flimsy, even on our side, that there's no chance of them ending in the Supreme Court. Now, what happens when a state is still in play? Maybe it's Florida all over again with 537 votes. What's so sad about this, 537 votes, right? That's what decided a president. We found like 100 times more than that improper ballots in just the last year that were cast around the country. So it's really unfortunate to see things hang so tight when so much is at stake.
Alan, how do you think this affects, like, as far as traditionally, having those election judges? We always talk about that at grassroots meetings, and as we're helping candidates, and as you're talking at the precinct level, and these volunteers getting these election judges trained. How do you think this new scenario affects that?
Well, that was one of the things that I was just dealing with today, because you had poll watchers being rejected from some of these county annexed collection points in Harris County. And so we're having to deal with that. And you even have in some of these areas, like in Dallas County, where I live, that you have that county clerk, those election supervisors that are doing everything to try to stymie the training for those Republican elected judges and also precincts. It is so clear and it's so obvious. And if I could come back to your question you asked, I really do think it backfires against the left. I think it will inspire people. I think that there are some independents out there that see this and understand what it is. And I think there are those old blue dog, soft Democrats that are still out there and around and don't want to align themselves with that. We just recently had a judge, a Obama appointee judge down in Laredo, Texas, Bobby, that came out last Friday and said that the state of Texas had to go back to straight party voting. Now, they've had 3 years to go and take care of this through the legislative process. But now all of a sudden, 3 weeks before the early voting starts, they want to try to change the straight party voting that we moved away from. The U.S. Fifth Circuit Court, knocked that down earlier this week. So instead of them out campaigning on ideas, instead of them out campaigning on their agenda or their policies, they're doing everything, as Christian has very well articulated, they're doing everything to undermine the system by which we go out, but yet they will castigate and demonize us as being the ones that, like he said, want to suppress votes. We want to get rid of the Democrat process. We want to have an illegitimate process, whatever. They're just repeating exactly who they are, what they intend to do. And hopefully Bobby will agree with me. I came into the position as chairman on the 20th of July. And I don't believe in playing defense. I'm going to go at them. I'm going to go at them very hard. And I want to inspire people to be fearless and to get out and report the things that they're seeing. And I think that's been the great thing that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks here in Texas, is that people are paying attention and people are reporting this, and we're getting information to the Secretary of State and over to the Attorney General.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Alan. I echo that, not from your military perspective, but as an athlete who, you focus on winning, you focus on training the best to your ability so you can win. And I see people fired up out there, like the event we were at last week. I mean, people are ready to get out there, support President Trump and support all these candidates. And I love what I'm seeing with the polling out there that shows this split with Republicans that are saying we're going to go vote in person because they don't trust this system. And President Trump is right to call it out. But to get out there, to see the excitement, to say, I'm going to vote in person, I know my vote is going to count. I really do hope it backfires on them.
Let me bring up something. The U.S. Election Assistance Commission has reported that in the last 4 federal elections, over 2 million absentee or mail-in ballots were misdelivered. And that same report shows that over 1 million ballots completed by voters and returned were rejected by election officials. And in that New York primary I was talking about, 1 in 5 ballots was rejected. So with those kind of numbers, we always hear the mantra from the left that there's no evidence of voter fraud, of, anything to worry about, but it's so massive and it's right there in our face, and everybody reads it and knows it, and it's just a shocking disconnect that is quite upsetting. I mean, is
Well,
there,
yeah, and it goes back to Roger, to some of the stuff we had talked about. The left over the decades has done their homework, and they've done so much better job of seeing the vital industries, areas of society that they need to infiltrate in order to have tremendous impact, tremendous influence. And we're seeing it manifest itself here through the legal profession. But we've seen it, as I said, in Hollywood, in big tech, in education. Now, it's just the Democrats don't see any difference between a judge and a politician. They want their judges to be politicians, and we're seeing the fallout from that. And it's just, who knows what's going to happen after November 3rd.
Christian, can you shed light on that commission that I'm talking about, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, and why that doesn't have a profound impact on what's going on?
Sure, and a point of pride on this. That was actually the Public Interest Legal Foundation that said, "Hey, let's go back and look at the AC reports and see how many mail ballots got canceled." And so we came up with the idea of going. We knew the Election Assistance Commission is a federal agency that collects data after every federal election and publishes it. And we've used their data spreadsheets for years. I don't recommend anyone ever trying to read them because they're the most horrifically complicated, columns, and there's a key. You don't even know what the column is. You have to look in a key. And I said, hey, let's go look at how many ballots have been rejected, because they track all this. And so we found that there were 28 million ballots. It might even be 31 million. I need to look at our report. But 28 million ballots that had not been, went missing. That's what it was. 28 million ballots went missing that were sent out that never came back. No one knows where they are. Another 2 million got rejected. They came back, but they were rejected. Now, when I first wrote a column saying that they were missing, the left attacked me. And they got all these academics to say, they're not missing. And one academic named Paul Gronke said, they're not missing. They're probably in landfills. That was his response to our characterization of miss. I said, Jimmy Hoffa's not missing. He's probably in a landfill.
Right.
So that's how the left plays. When you publish data from a federal agency, they feel compelled to attack you. And that's how central this is to their agenda.
Alan, do you have any closing comments? Are you optimistic? I mean, how do you see this playing out? And are you ready for the fight? I know you are.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. Last week, Sunday, I was down in the Houston area for a Vietnamese community rally for President Trump. About 600 people that were there. You go into the Rio Grande Valley, Laredo, Texas, you see an incredible enthusiasm. You see people that understand that they don't want socialism, Marxism. They have seen this type of nefarious electoral activity happen before, and that's how they lost elections. That's how they lost their countries, and that's why they're here in the United States of America. But I think the most important thing that Christian brought out, and one of my goals and purposes, is that we can't just continue to ramp up for an election cycle. We've got to have a steady state. We got to continue to meet them on this battlefield of ideological agendas, and we've got to make sure that we are thwarting all of their illegal and nefarious efforts. And we've got to punish them for it, because if not, it's very Pavlovian. You continue to reward bad behavior when you don't do anything with it, and they just get better with their practices as they go along. So thanks so much for having me on this call.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I saw just in the last few weeks and some in this week, we got Rick Scott, the senator from Florida, has introduced legislation where he wanted to make it uniform on when the ballots have to be in. And he wanted it to be by election day. But I mean, obviously you made the 90-day point. There's nothing that can be done in the last 90 days. And Tulsi Gabbard and a Republican congressman introduced another bill to make harvesting illegal. But again, I guess they weren't looking at this election. They're looking for future elections. And it's just, where was the foresight from Republicans and conservatives 90 days ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, to not see this coming? I mean, this has kind of been a train wreck in slow motion, just clear as day that it was coming.
Well, let me give you the bad news, and I'll give you the worst news.
Okay.
So first, the bad news. I am a big fan of the way the founders structure the Constitution, and that is that the states are supposed to run their own elections. Decentralization of elections promotes individual liberty. It prevents a single malevolent actor from seizing control of the Washington, D.C. election command. I think it's a good thing for liberty, and the founders were in favor of that. And so I'm generally resistant to calls to nationalize everything because that's what the left wants to do. The second thing, which is the worst news that'll really roll you, is and we didn't talk about this, but a lot of non-citizens are getting on the voter rolls, and they're getting on the voter rolls through the motor voter process. Motor voter law in 1993, Bill Clinton. They're going into DMVs to get their driver's licenses, and the DMVs are messing up and giving them the opportunity to register to vote. And a lot of the times, we just sued Harris County, Texas last week. They're marking no, I'm not a citizen, but they're still getting registered to vote. So they're telling the government, I'm a foreigner, and then they get on the voter rolls. Okay. For years, we've known this was happening. And the Republicans were in charge from 2017 to 2019 in the House, in the Senate, in the White House. And we brought this to the attention of many, many, many Republican congressmen. But the House Administration Committee that has jurisdiction over this very issue had absolutely no interest in fixing motor voter. It was just, we got bigger things like tax cuts, right? Now ask the average American, I'm sorry, I like tax cuts, but ask them what makes them angrier or what they want more. Although I don't know the answer to this, so let me, you shouldn't ask a question you don't know the answer to. What makes them angrier, non-citizens voting or a $20 a year tax cut? So you get my point.
Yeah.
This is a big issue to people to have foreigners voting in our election, but nothing happened in that Congress when we could have fixed it.
So when you said most of these cases won't be going to the Supreme Court, do you see this election ultimately being decided by a Supreme Court vote?
It could, because you're going to have deadlines possibly being missed, right?
Yeah.
And it may take a Supreme Court opinion to say, hey, December 3rd is December 3rd. If you don't have your certificate of attainment sent to Washington, you aren't going to get electors. Now, it may be that the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania wants that to happen, or Michigan wants that to happen because Donald Trump might win Michigan. But that's the sort of danger we face. Look, I'm so glad everybody watching is interested in election integrity. Let's carry over in January and March and next summer to care.
Will do.
All right.
Thanks, Christian.
I want to thank you both for being here
Bye-bye.
today. It's been great. Thank you
Take
so
care.
much. And we're signing off from this special event. Bobby, it's great. Our first show under the belt. And
Yeah, I loved it. I loved
let's
it,
do
Roger.
more.
It's a great idea. And I'm definitely looking forward to putting these together and getting them out there to the public. They need to know these issues, and you've got the contacts and the means to put this together. I'm so excited to be part of it.
Yeah, me too. Well, terrific. Well, this was great. Thank you. And we're signing off. Hope everybody enjoys the show. Take care.